or not. Okay, the word justice is not in the TRRC's nomenclature, like we have in Kenya, Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission. The Gambia's is Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission. You can remember K-Mason suggesting reparations should come first before reconciliation. Those are all opinions, but that does not mean there is not going to be justice. According to the TRRC's Act, the people that bears the greatest responsibility are going to be punished. That is, prosecution can be recommended for people like that. Yes, there will be some people that the commission may recommend amnesty for, but obviously people who bear the greatest responsibility, and the commission will decide who are those that carry the greatest responsibility. And justice will certainly be served by recommending those people for prosecution. And I believe when justice is served, when people who are supposed to be punished are actually punished for the bad things that they do, the people will be happy with that, and that will facilitate reconciliation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sambu from the TRRC. Now, I would just like to reiterate, if you have any questions, you please give your name over to Mr. Bakari Fati. And of course, Mr. Hussein Thomasi is also here to help with any concerns and complaints that you may have about all the reforms that we have. Now, very quickly, before I end this particular session, I'll just ask Mr. Job, how much should we expect from the National Human Rights Commission as far as it being apolitical is concerned? And how far can you go in an instance where the government of the Gambia is found complicit or is found guilty of human rights violations? How powerful is the National Human Rights Commission?
Thank you very much once again for that very important question. I certainly know that the expectation of Gambians is really very, very high. And fortunately, the commissioners of the National Human Rights Commission are also aware of this particular fact. Having regard to the challenges that the Gambia faced over the past 22 years, I think the National Human Rights Commission has learned a lot from what we have seen through the proceedings of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commissions. So certainly the expectation is very high, and the Commission is aware of this, and the Commission is also preparing very, very well to ensure that at least it meets up the expectation of Gambians. The National Human Rights Commission is certainly a very independent institution. It is an institution that is independent, as you said, is apolitical from government. And in fact, this is one of the principles that is embedded in the Paris Principle for national human rights institutions. They should enjoy a high degree of autonomy and non-interference. And the Act has given very wide powers to the Commission, in the sense that the Commission can investigate violations of public institutions as well as private institutions. So this shows to a certain degree that the Commission is indeed powerful, because the actions of human rights violation that the Commission is going to monitor, investigate, and preside over is not only limited to government institutions, but also private institutions. And of course, as a Human Rights Commission, it is there to ensure that it holds government to account where the government is found wanting. And the powers are also there to ensure that where the government violates human rights of either individuals, then the Commission is likely to intervene by making the necessary recommendation to ensure that the government complies with that. And the Act has even went further to empower the Commission to seek for redress in certain instances where the government, for example, failed to adhere to recommendations put forward by the National Human Rights Commission. So indeed, it is powerful, but then since the Constitutional Review Commission is ongoing, it can be made more powerful to ensure that at least the decision of the National Human Rights Commission is binding. Because at the moment, it seems to be advisory. It can advise government on certain wrongs that the government is involved in and ensure that at least those wrongs are corrected and ensure non-repetition. So in essence, the powers are there. And the way things have started, the National Human Rights Commission is looking forward to a very cordial relationship with the government. Because our role is not only to be condemning government actions when it comes to human rights violations. Our role is to ensure accountability, and our role is to ensure non-repetition of those violations. So in essence, we are not just there to be condemning rights violations, but we are also partners with government in as much as we try to claim our independence, but we need to collaborate in our work. Because what we are doing is the ultimate responsibility of the government. As I said from the beginning, it is the government's obligation to ensure the protection and promotion of human rights. So we are assisting them in essence, and I hope they will also be very accommodative to ensure that we partner in this journey and ensure that the expectations of all Gambians, including the youths, are met.
Thank you very much. That was the representative of the National Human Rights Commission. And of course, like we mentioned, this conversation is entirely for you and about you. So if you have any questions, I'll hand the microphone over to Bakary Fatou. So you come over here and then you tell us what your question or your concerns are. But if you are the side type, you could just write it down on a piece of paper, hand it over to him, and I'll have it read out, and of course it will be answered. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Where are you? Okay. So, we have a couple of names here. To begin with, Mustafa Sonko. Please let us make sure that our questions are short and precise, and you direct it to any of the panelists. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. I have two questions. The first one goes to the security sector reform, that is Madam Samba, and then the second one goes to the TRRC. I am Mustafa Sonko. Now, the National Development Plan, according to sources close to the corridors of power, is running out of budget deficit. This goes to tell us that there is a problem with the planners in the National Development Plan. And this, to the layman, clearly tells us that it might not work. How so are we that the security sector reform will not also run out of financial problems? And then another question, and the same, just a follow-up question, with regard to the way that Jammeh has tampered with the security sector of this country. We know that those apparatus were there, and then he had a lot of hands in them, even though you've changed the NIA to SIS. How so are we that our security sector reform will not be totally controlled by the president, who himself is the one who set up such commission and has a say over them? The second question goes to the TRRC. There has been a lot of hullabaloo going around. It started with the CRC when they traveled outside on a consultation. How do you convince the layman that the tour that the councils are taking out of this country is not meant to enrich themselves? Because to the layman, if someone is in America, the person could have come to this country to testify or in fact give a statement. What is the difference between somebody coming here or you people live in the Gambia to meet them abroad? Looking at the financial constraints of this country, how do you explain that to a layman? Thank you.
Thank you, Mustafa. I hope the panelists are also taking note of the questions. Let's have Dembo Kuyate.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you all. My question will go to Mr. Jawai of the CRC. And I just wish to know if, I think your rollout programs, your activities in the communities, your consultations are very great. You meet people in their communities, you engage them, you have discussions, just to make sure that their views and opinions are also captured in the Constitution. That process is great, but I just wish to know if children, because we know childhood is not a permanent destination of an individual to stay. Likewise, the youthful age also is never a permanent destination. But if we are talking in the lands of sustainability, I think we want our children to be informed so that if they grow to become youth, they can be already empowered and they can contribute positively to national development. But again, if children are engaged, from experience, we know you cannot set them questionnaires or so. There are mechanisms that you can always put in place to get the views of children. This could be child-friendly tools that you can use, to get their opinions. So I wish to know what are some of the ways and means that you engage children in your rural programs in the CRC process. Thank you.
Thank you, Dembo. Can we have Karim Mwai Dabo? Please try to be precise. There's a threat to you.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Assalamu alaikum. I just have two concerns or questions. Let me just say it like that. I want to thank you all for the good job that you're doing for the start. Now, my concern in conjunction to a question is, we have seen so many concerns, and one of my question is going to you. That is the Justice Ministry. And most of these commissions are established or put by an act of the National Assembly, and after that they started working. But the just concluded commission that was sent to the President, that is the Jane Commission, we've seen that there were some changes that is done by the Cabinet. That is, the President and the Cabinet has made some changes to the report by the Jane Commission, or to the recommendations by the Jane Commission. So my question or my doubt is, if people elected their National Assembly members who act on behalf of us to make sure those commissions are established, should we allow a cabinet that one man select, has the president select his ministers, they sit under that report and change what they want to change from the report? I think we should have our reports as citizens raw, because we are the one who are paying those commissioners to do that good job for us. If it goes to the president, it has been summarized, it has been changed, I think that should be against our wish. So I don't know what is the Constitutional Review Commission, Mr. Jabai, doing so that before the new constitution, before it goes to the referendum, it has to go to the president or the cabinet or whatever. We want to have our constitution that we agreed on raw before the president sees it or before the cabinet sits over it. So that as people, we can vote on that, because we don't want individual decisions or cabinet decisions to reflect on our constitution. So I don't know whether you are working on that for us to have it. The other thing is, how are we making our commissioners responsible? I think I have a lot of reservations about the TRRC going abroad to control or to go and talk to people there when we have people who were testifying before through video. I think that is very costly and is against some of the things that we believe in.
Thank you. Let's endeavor to be direct and sorting our questions. So the next person, Honorable Bakari Kamara. After then we can allow.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I first would like to introduce myself as Honorable Bakari Kamara, National Assembly Member, Kian Central, and then that of my colleagues, Honorable Koli from Kian West. It's unfortunate that we arrived very late due to traffic congestions, so we must apologize for that. I want to ask questions, make corrections, as well as make a comment. My first concern is on the security sector reform. Madam, I don't know how prepared your office is. Our development partners are very, very passionate about the issue of security reform in the country. Again, the people of this country too need to know what does the security sector reform entails. Sometimes you see it entails fear in some people. Some people think that they are going to lose their job. When we say security sector reform, they are going to be removed, because we all know how some people got their way into the security, various security units in this country. Would there be an opportunity for you to go around and sensitize people about your mandate concerning the security sector reform? The other issue is on National Human Rights Commission, mentioned by Mr. Tomasi. I equally want to inform this gathering and Mr. Tomasi that for the first time again in the history of this country, we have a committee on human rights and constitutional matters at the National Assembly level. And then we are more than the word committed. Just 2-3 weeks ago, we had a trip in The Hague, the Netherlands, where the members were trained on constitutional building techniques, all geared to make sure that we have a better constitution for this country. On the TRRC, I want to believe, apart from reconciliation, like one of your mandate, there's a need for justice. But reconciliation is very, very important. Of recent, we have seen some junglers who testified at the TRRC, and then the Ministry of Justice decided to release them. I think they were detained for a long time at the Mile 2 prison, and they were released. They are now with their families. And then that one has generated a lot of outcry, both within and outside the Gambia. Some people are saying they should not be released. These people were involved in killings. But in as much as we want to promote reconciliation, I want to know what would be the take of the TRRC on that, whether it's right to release them or not to release them, as some people have already suggested. On the CRRC, that is the constitutional review, you will recall, it will be recalled that you went around to solicit people's opinion on the new constitution. I don't know whether there will be opportunity again for you to go back to them and say, this is what we have said, and it is captured. It will give them an opportunity to ascertain very well, this is what we have said. We don't want to have a situation wherein when a referendum is done, or when the constitution is out, people will sit down there and say, well, when they came here, this is what we have said, and we have not seen that one. So people need to have an adequate information and adequate knowledge about our constitution. I want to believe people were not informed before. In 1998, when, was it not August 8, 1996, when the first referendum was held in the Second Republic, people just went to polls blindly. They did not even know what they were voting for. In fact, most of them believe that if you vote yes, or if you vote no, it's like these people are going to stay here, so let's just vote yes so that they can go. And then along the way, a lot of amendments were done in order to suit somebody's interest. We all know what had happened in this country. The other issue that I have is going to be sort of a correction. The Constitution said there should be an intelligence unit called NIA. Now that when the new government came in, we have what is called SIS. Our Constitution says NIA, and we still stand with that one. We still have NIA, we don't have SIS. If you are going to have SIS, we're going to, when the new Constitution is out, when that changes is done, then it should be communicated to us. But as far as the National Assembly is concerned, or as far as I am concerned, we still have NIA. The issue of SIS, I don't believe in that. We still have the Constitution that we still use, and that Constitution says NIA, there is nothing like SIS. Yes, finally, is this just a concern? This is just a concern like Madam Samba mentioned. If you look at the road, I think the biggest problem we have in this country is road construction. Almost all the region, anywhere you go in this country, people are crying about the road. and we have a national development plan. I think as a country, it's high time that we do something. You cannot run government on, how would I even put it, on going out on grant. It's not sustainable. 2 days ago, the Honorable Minister for Works and Communication appeared before us in the National Assembly, and then a lot of questions were asked by the honorable members concerning the road construction, particularly Kian West. I asked this man, this is one of the areas in this country commuters has to get up as early as 4 o'clock in order to be in Combos and in Banjul. But the only answer is noted. Or when funds are available, we will construct the road. And we have a national development plan. So Gambians now have the rights to ask the minister and even the president that promises were made during campaign. So why is it that, and we were told that 80 billion, not even million, but 80 billion euro is being pledged by various development partners that they are going, and if that fund or those funds are not forthcoming, I think we have right to ask questions as to why these funds are not coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable. So we can go with the panelists. Rohi?
It's just pleasures. Thank you for the questions. Before I start answering, I will have to make a little clarification with respect to the reconciliation and justice. I think a lot of literature has been written with respect to that. And if we are just curious enough, we'll know about the two elements of retributive justice and reparative justice. That even reparation itself is a form of justice. So these are just some of the things I wanted to talk with respect to the TRRC, because I've spent a stint there and I've done a little bit of research. Regarding my questions as to SSR implementation and the issue of financing, I'm going to read because the questions are so many, I had to write them down. The reform process, we must know, is designed in an integrated and holistic manner, but implemented through sectoral projects and action plans, regarded as implementation mechanisms specific to each area of intervention. So you have defense reform, you have police reform, you have customs reform, and yes, we have SIS reform. It is no longer NIA. Until this constitution is amended, you may choose not to recognize it, but with respect to reforms, which may take time, because very soon you'll have this CRC, but it's not laid in concrete. It will have to go through another kind of consultation and stuff, but still we have the priority, the prerogatives to do our reforms without waiting for the end game, because that's why for the most part you hear about security sector reform being very slow. We don't have to wait until our report is out to start the reforms. So this is just a preventive rather than a reactive measure. Now, as I said, the development of SSR was focused on governance while ensuring institutional and sector-wide coherence. Now, these reforms that have just the areas of intervention, you may not be able to sponsor or maybe support the whole project, but partners have been identified who can assist in the specific areas of intervention. For example, GAF has many partners assisting, including UNDP and other partners. You have the British coming up. So the development partners, they are cross-cutting. There are a number of them. You may not have every sector, because when we talk about security sector institutions, we are talking about 8 of them. You know, the 6 from the Ministry of Interior, in addition to GAF and the other 2. So if not all of them, at least the ones needing the most reform, namely Gambia Armed Forces, Gambia Police Force, and the PIU has been mentioned a lot of times. They have also benefited from a lot of training. These institutions, it is a must. they will have at least 2 or 3 countries that are willing to sponsor them. So to say that the SSR can fail because it doesn't have sponsors, we may not have sponsors for all institutions, but we will certainly have some. Regarding the presidential impunity to do as he please, because he instituted the reforms, that's why the reforms are done concurrently. When you have a strong constitution, the president cannot do anything aside from what it stipulates. But more than that, I told you about the security sector strategy that is currently being drafted. And this security sector strategy lays its emphasis on security governance. And that governance is accountability and accessibility of security institutions, but also making them answerable to those democratic norms and the justice and security needs of the citizenry. When that is done, when we have security sector governance, there's oversight mechanisms that will ensure that the president does not have that power or authority to actually rescind or stop any kind of reform. How prepared are we at ONS? And especially regarding the issue of right sizing, that is the people, the institutions, the security institutions that have people who are not supposed to be there. Right sizing is a big elephant in the room. It's a political as well as a technical thing. It's a process as much as the reform itself, but it must be done with prudence. Otherwise, there will be chaos. However, they bought in. It is neither fear nor under any human right law or justice to remove them whimsically. There needs to be policies. I think we are used to our institutions, especially institutional head, doing as they please. You don't do anything without quoting at least a policy or SOP. So what we are doing currently with respect to that is outreach to sensitize people regarding this right sizing. I am currently working with all the PROs of all the security institutions to come up with an outreach program that will go out to the masses and make sure that security sector reform is at the lips of everybody, every citizen. It's going to be a very difficult task, but it is doable. That's all I have for your questions. Thank you.
Actually, no wonder we have quite a lot of questions directed to me as a Constitutional Review Commission. It wasn't a particular question, but I just want to talk a little bit about the CRC going out of the country to consult with Gambians. It's important for us to know that the act that establishes the Constitutional Review Commission clearly spells out that we are mandated to speak to Gambians at home and abroad. And I can tell you the consultations we've had abroad have been really consultative, massive turnouts. For example, when I was part of the delegation that went to the Africa trip, and then you'll be surprised in Nouakchott, we have over 500 Gambians that came out to participate in the discussions. I mean, how will it be if we haven't consulted them? I mean, when we went out to the Gambians abroad, we've seen a sense of relief from them, considering the fact that they're also part of the process. As we say earlier, we want this to be a people-centered constitution, and we have quite a lot of Gambians abroad, so it's important to actually talk to them as well. So the question of children participating in the review process. So I'll actually tell you this. As I said in the beginning, we are focusing on individuals who would be 18, come 2021, and that basically means children by 16. So our focus basically has been children, because even during the internal consultations, the school tours, these are all individuals you find in schools right now. Most of them are children, obviously. So we basically consider them in terms of the discussion. They've been major parts of those who have been expressing opinions. We've gone to schools, in Bantabas, where we have children as well. So the youth-focused discussions also include children in part of the discussion. But more importantly, we've actually prepared a frequently asked questions and answers where it's basically simplified to the understanding of high school children and quite a lot of stuff. But more importantly, these constitutional provisions, especially the issues of citizenship, the issues of whether or not the Constitution should guarantee right to free education, free healthcare, and so on. These are issues that concerns the children, and they are major issues that form part of our discussion. So I think, at the level of the Commission, children are really, part of the discussions, and even we have some children-focused institutions who've also submitted position papers to the Constitutional Review Commission. Of course, these are issues that basically highlight the issues of children and what basically are good for them in the coming constitution. So Karim Wada's question regarding the president being able to, make amendments in the constitution, and if they will have the second chance to make submissions. I mean, to tell you what, the draft constitution will basically come out before we actually submit to the president. We have a draft constitution which we are basically preparing, and if it is done, we will go back to the public. We'll have a nationwide consultation again, where we will go to the public to say, this is, when we came here, this is what you told us, and this is what we basically prepare. Is this something, is this a document that basically reflects, your wishes and aspirations? And then, a second chance will be given to the public to make a recommendation, say, yes, this is what we want, we don't want this. And then we'll go back to the drawing board before the final report will be presented to the president. So you can be fully assured that we'll basically go back. So talking about the constitution lying at the office of the presidency, I mean, I just want to make it very clear that the act that establishes the commission has limitations in terms of where we stop as a commission. So the commission only limits to, our mandate only limits to, as I said in the beginning, reviewing and analyzing the constitution, preparing the draft, and also submitting the report. So as soon as we do that in December, our mandate basically ends from there. So what comes after that, lies at the level of the presidency. So the advisor to the Minister of Justice is here. Maybe, we can redirect the question to him to say, after the CRC present the draft constitution to the president, what will basically happen? So the act basically, did not basically go further to say that when the Constitutional Review Commission present the draft to the president, it has to spend latest 4 months, 6 months, 2 days, 3 days before it finally reaches to the office of the president, or before the president finally submits it to the National Assembly. And there is no timeline also to say this, it has to spend this amount of days or months in the National Assembly before it finally goes out to the IEC for referendum. So these are, I call them gaps, for example. So, but here comes the civil society organization and the young people, for us to also be on our feet. And so, as I said in the beginning, it's one thing to submit your position papers. It's one thing to say, this is what we want. But another thing to also ensure that the final product comes out as soon as possible. I think basically, unless if there is any other thing I've skipped, which I'm not really sure. But I think these are, the Honorable also talked about whether we'll be able to go back to the public, which I've already dilated on. So the good thing about this Constitutional Review Commission Act is that, we are also empowered to make public the final draft that we are submitting to the president. So as soon as we submit to the president concurrently, we will also make public. So at the level of the audience, at the level of the Gambian people, you will be able to know that this is the constitution that has been this is the draft constitution that has been submitted to the president. So for example, if there are any changes, you will have the liberty to know and detect. But these are issues that are not basically captured in the act. So as far as we are concerned, we will vanish into thin air immediately after submitting the draft to the president. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I have 2 questions to respond to. I will start with the second question that came from the Honorable, asking whether it was right to release the junglers from TRRC's perspective. My response to that is TRRC is not there to determine whether it was right or wrong to release the junglers. TRRC's mandate is if junglers are accused of being responsible of human rights violations, killing, torture, and whatever, TRRC's mandate is to bring those people to tell the public what they have done, how they did it, who asked them to do it. So what happened after that, it is not TRRC that arrested them. They were in detention, right? Yes, but it was not TRRC that arrested them. In fact, they were arrested even before the TRRC's work started. But they testified at TRRC. That is what TRRC can do. But whether to release them or to continue keeping them in the zone, that's not TRRC's decision to make. That is the Ministry of Justice's decision to make, and the Ministry of Justice came out to tell the people why they did that in trying to help the work of the TRRC, so that it is not only victims coming out to testify, but even encourage more junglers, more perpetrators to come out and testify. So on that, this is what I can say. It's not TRRC that released them, and TRRC is not also there to decide whether it was right to release them or wrong.
What I'm saying, whether it's not going to be an infringement on the process of reconciliation on the side of TRRC, that is, you know, they are there to promote the spirit of reconciliation.
Yes.
Whether that one is not going to be an infringement on the process of reconciliation.
No. Yeah, I don't think that is going to affect the TRRC. Yeah, from people's perception. But generally, I don't think, because TRRC, aside from the public hearings, we are doing a lot of community sensitizations, community dialogues. And anywhere these questions come, we are able to give them befitting responses to build up their confidence in TRRC, that what you have tasked us to do is by bringing perpetrators, bringing victims to tell us what happened, we are doing that. So the Ministry of Justice can also do their own things in their way, and the public can ask them questions when they think what they did is not right. But TRRC's work, this is not going to discourage the TRRC, and it's not going to even affect the work of the TRRC, because our mandate of bringing witnesses to speak about what has happened is going on and will continue up to the end of the TRRC's mandate. So the other question that was asked with regards to whether the TRRC's travel abroad is not meant to enrich the commissioners and the staff. I will say, if this travel was about money, it would have happened since around February or March, because this is entirely funded by UNDP, not TRRC, not the Gambia government, it's UNDP. And UNDP proposed for this trip to happen long since. But because there was no time, TRRC was busy all along, the trip could not happen until now. So if it is about money, it would have happened since around March or April. But I will tell you, as I said earlier, we are embarking on a lot of outreach, even here in the Gambia. Beside the public hearing that most of you follow, that the media carries much, I think it is high time that the media start following us on our outreach, so that people will see that part too, and how much impact that is making. Because a lot of outreach activities that we do, we have Gambians who will be part of those outreach activities. During those discussions, will come out and tell us how they are victims and how we help them to get connected to the TRRC to be able to give their statements and eventually come over for TRRC's processes. So if that is happening in the Gambia, that we have people who are here who can't have access to TRRC, I believe it is the same even in the diaspora. We will have a lot of Gambians in the diaspora who will be victims, who may not even have that facilities, that resources to be able to get to TRRC at themselves. But TRRC, this is not even about hearing. It's not about testifying, that outreach. It's about getting to Gambian people and getting the TRRC close to them to have that direct interaction, to ask questions and get answers, and also be able to know what TRRC is all about and every other thing. But importantly, the TRRC is given the mandate to grant reparation, just as I said earlier. This diaspora engagement is also another opportunity for TRRC to engage Gambians diaspora to be able to raise funds for the reparations for victim support. We've been seeing how the Gambian diaspora have been supporting victims when they come to testify and they think they need to support. They will come up with a GoFundMe account and they will support these people. So it is also part of the work that TRRC engage Gambians outside the Gambia directly, have that dialogue with them, and give them reasons why they should support Gambian victims. And already this is making a lot of impact. We have seen sessions, if you are following in social media, where we have hundreds of Gambians gathering at one place in different countries, different parts of Europe and America, talking to TRRC directly and telling them their problems, some of which we cannot know if we want them to do it online or using the social media platforms to tell the TRRC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Babukar Sambu of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission. So I want to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Alhaji Fadera. Of course, Mr. Dabo, I know there are a lot of people that want to talk. I mean, when you talk about the reforms, that is what happens. Mr. Hussein Tomasi, Madam Aissata Day, you'll all have the opportunity to talk to these young people. But what I do not know is what Mr. Fadera is actually doing at the back when our NDP is failing. I'll invite Mr. Fadera to come right in front. Because, I mean, it was barely just 2 years when a very happy-looking President Adama Barrow came back from Brussels with his technocrats and announced to us that billions of dollars will be pumped into the country. We were all happy and all smiles. Until recently, when a declaration or a disclosure was made that the ambitious NDP is facing funding challenges. What has gone wrong, Mr. Fadera, and how would it affect the overall implementation of the NDP?
Okay, thank you very much. I'll be very brief. Yesterday we had deliberations on this issue. That's the National Development Plan, brief synopsis of how it was formulated and the progress so far. We did indicate here yesterday that there is an annual progress report that is being finalized currently, will be out very soon for 2018. And the information that we have from that, we spoke about the pledges and we try to differentiate between what pledges are, what disbursements are, and what commitments are. Said in Brussels in May 2018, $1.7 billion was what was pledged. In a layman's term, a pledge could just be equated to a promise that we promise to support you, like you have a house. You want to do what? You want to build your house. Somebody promises that I'm going to give you so many packets of corrugated iron sheets. Commitments are when you have some concrete undertaking, either in the form of what? Writing grant agreements or loan agreements to say that we would actually deliver this amount of money. And we talked about how much was committed as at end December 2018, about $900 and something million was what was committed. Then we said from the assessment that we have done, in terms of disbursement, about 10% of the funds were disbursed. Disbursed means actually funds that were released for implementation. And we said this figure would likely pick up and could pick up significantly quickly if you look at some of the interventions. If you have major energy projects that are underway, like rural electrification, like the electrification of of schools, of health facilities, about more than 1,000 of them. Once these things pick up, the disbursement rates will quicken significantly. So yesterday we spoke about this and we try as much as possible. So as far as we're concerned, if anything, as human beings, we just have to make sure that we enhance whatever we are doing, because there is always room for improvement. We cannot be complacent and say that at this rate everything is going to be fine. We have to make sure that we continue the hard work to make sure that we're able to access as much of these grants as possible. And we did a comparison saying that given our historical trends in the past, this is not the first time the Gambia has been doing a national development plan or a poverty reduction strategy. But if you look at the movement from pledges to commitments and to disbursements, we say this has been very encouraging. And the annual progress report was not just like government officials sitting down together and then doing this. It was led by an independent consultant and included consulted different stakeholders up and above above government. So it was not just a government process where you can say government was assessing itself and tapping itself on the back. There is room for improvement, just like in every human endeavor, and we have to work together to make sure that we deliver on this. Thank you very much. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm sure we'll have that question when we take our second round of questions.
Yeah. Yes. No, if you will, because like I told you, once this is finalized, that will be in the public domain. You cannot do an annual progress report of a national development. It's not a government development plan, but even if it is a government development plan, government owes it to the people to make sure that it shows what kind of progress is being made. And the annual progress report is not just about looking at the progress, but also what challenges were encountered during implementation, and how can we address those challenges. And this will be what? This will be provided. Now I think there was what? Very soon I think somebody asked a question to an official of what? A cabinet member on the NDP, the progress. And I think very soon, probably during this your sitting, response will be made as far as, and that relates very closely to what progress has been registered. So hopefully that executive member would provide those comments. Yes.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Alaji Fadera from the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs. You can all save your questions, and of course, when we are taking the other round of questions, we'll definitely answer to them. Of course, like I said, this conversation is about you. It's about the young people and their interests and their development. So we'll definitely do that. But now I'll hand you over to Mr. Hussein Tomasi. He's the special advisor to the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much. I just want to make clarification on the issues of the commissions that have been established. Some of the commissions, most of them, were established by acts of parliament. This is what we see in the TRRC as well as the Constitutional Review Commission. The Janneh Commission was not established by an act of parliament. It was established by powers vested to the president under the Constitution, under Section 200. Under Section 200 of the Constitution, the president can cause a commission to be issued on any matter of any public interest. And then that commission would look into the matter, investigate it based on the Commission of Inquiry Act, and then make recommendations to the president. Now, the Janneh Commission is a commission that fits entirely under that portfolio. Now, when such a report is made available to the president, as the Janneh Commission was, under the Constitution, and I emphasize under the Constitution, the president is empowered to come out within a period of 6 months, to come out, either publish the report, come out with comments on the report, and explain, make a statement about actions that have been taken. Where the president in his own decision decides not to take any action pertaining to the report, he can explain also, make a publication that he does not intend to publish the report. This, I must say, it is a power vested under the Constitution to the president. And this is what the president had done. He had looked at the Janneh Commission report with his cabinet, and they have come out with a white paper explaining their reaction to the recommendations of the Janneh Commission, as well as publishing the whole Janneh Commission report. So let's cause a distinction between these two commissions. Others are set up by acts of parliament. So it doesn't mean that this is a situation where the president just does whatever he wishes with the recommendations. That was a particular commission, and his reactions, he was entitled to do so, come up with reasons for even not accepting some of the recommendations. That is a power vested to him under the Constitution. Perhaps moving forward, where we think that this is a problem, of course, this is something for the Constitutional Review Commission to look at. But other commissions were established by acts of parliament, and what is to be done about the report is specifically spelled in those respective acts, like the CRC and the TRRC. Now, coming to the CRC, let me state that I agree entirely, you are right. The Act does not stipulate a period within which, after the submission and publication of the report, within which the president should present the Constitution to the National Assembly. There is no time frame in the Constitutional Review Act. But the president is empowered under the Act to come up with a bill introducing the Constitution to the National Assembly. And until the bill is introduced to the National Assembly and the bill passed, the Constitutional Review Commission stands stands in place. It does not dissolve when it submits a report. It stands in place. The Constitution Review Commission will continue to exist until Parliament considers the bill introducing the Constitution and then passes the Act and the Constitution to the Independent Electoral Commission for the Constitution to go to a referendum. So this is where definitely, in as much as there is no time frame, but you have a catch-22 situation where the president would be obliged and have no choice but to make sure that the bill is introduced because the Constitution Review Commission would still be in existence. Of course, unless the state wants to continue incurring expenses in maintaining a Constitutional Review Commission in place. But it's a bit dicey because we have not had a time period. But the point is that the Constitutional Review Commission would stay in place until Parliament considers the bill introducing the Constitution. On the diaspora engagement, my friend from the Constitutional Review Commission is entirely right. It is provided for in the CRC Act. I know a lot of people have been talking about issues relating to perhaps commissioners going on holidays or on an exercise that's not necessary. But let's be serious. No nation can ignore its diaspora population. The diaspora is a significant constituency. And in most countries, when they carry out constitutional review processes, they also consult their diaspora community. This has been done in several countries. We have seen it in Ghana. They did it. And this is exactly what we have done. There are issues relating to voting by the diaspora, this being considered, whether we should give them the mandate, the franchise should be extended to them. There are also issues relating to dual citizenship. And these are all issues that we have to take on with the diaspora. And more so, we should all recognize the contribution that the diaspora played in the change that has happened in this country and in the role that they continue to play. So they are a very significant constituency. We cannot ignore them. But nevertheless, that's why we made provision for it in the Constitutional Review Commission, that they will be consulted in the constitutional process because there are also issues affecting them. And I think the same applies for the TRRC. It's not really commissioners going on holidays. The people we have put at the helm of affairs of these commissions are highly credible and respectable people. Look at the composition of the Constitutional Review Commission. Look at the composition of the CRC. These are not people who would just go on holidays or just want to go abroad for the sake of going abroad. It is because what they are doing is meaningful for their work and is also meaningful for this country. I believe on the issue of the junglers, I have had cause to explain this last week, and I agree entirely with Mr. Sambu. It was something that the Minister of Justice did, and we believe it was in the best interest of this country to do so. It's best interest of realizing the objectives, of the Truth and Reconciliation and Reparations Commission. In fact, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission will, at the end of its deliberations, finally determine, make a recommendation to the government as to those who would be prosecuted. So it's not that justice is entirely left in the back burner. No, it is very much in the front burner. Justice issues are to be considered by the Truth Commission. They will make a recommendation, but their recommendation will be based on those who have who are most responsible, those who bear the greatest responsibility in the atrocities committed. And at this stage, it is premature for us to say we will prosecute anyone, because we certainly do not have the evidence. We are at the stage when we are trying to gather the evidence and then make a decision. And that decision, by law, is given to the commissioners of the TRRC, is given to the commission, and we should wait for their decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hussein Thomarsi, Special Advisor to the Ministry of Justice and the Attorney General. Now, we know the UNDP is a very special partner to this event. It is an important partner of the National Youth Council. And, of course, we have the UN resident representative, Madam Aissa, today.
Yes, thank you. Just a contribution to what have been said regarding the National Development Plan and the engagement, diaspora engagement. I think it's a good news to have the Parliament so much interested in the implementation of the National Development Plan, because one of the functions of the Parliament is, of course, to oversee the implementation of such an important strategic document. And the fact that the NDP is also generating many questions is a sign of ownership, and this is what is entitled for such an important document. But I think we need to go beyond the numbers. I think it's true that pledges have been made and people are just looking at the 1.7 billion that are captivating the opinion in terms of resources. But what is important is what is the plan is about. And for the youth engagement, as I said this morning, the main issue is how do you really know what is in this plan? What are the targets? What are the indicators? Whether the country is on track, and what is needed as extra support. We are here to accompany the implementation of the National Development Plans, a strategic document which is aligned with objectives that the Gambia has defined within the international agenda for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's clear that between yesterday and today, what we have noticed is we need more information and more outreach regarding the NDP. And I think the fact that the National Youth Council has also put the NDP in its agenda will create an opportunity for greater involvement of the entire population that indeed participating in on the drafting of this important strategic document. On the diaspora engagement, I just wanted to reiterate the fact that the support to the TRRC is done jointly between UNDP and the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights. And there are international standards that the TRRC is aligned in terms of implementation of its activities. UNDP is not telling to the TRRC to do this and that. UNDP is here to support, like we are supporting all the institutions and the country in general for the achievement of this development agenda. And the fact that, and I think Mr. Tomasi rightly said that, the fact that the diaspora is engaged is a big good thing. It's really good for the country, because we know that economically many of our African countries are being sustained thanks to the economic engagement of the diaspora. So when you cannot dissociate economic engagement with civic engagement. So the TRRC is one area where we need to have the diaspora views, and it has been done in almost all the countries where we have similar truth and reconciliation commissions, but also in other processes. We've seen it on electoral assistant, on electoral processes, we've seen on constitutional reviews, and many other areas. In some countries, citizens from the diaspora are even member of parliament. They come a sitting member of parliament. So just to say that it's something that we need to value, and again, go beyond the spirit of just stopping on figures without knowing what is behind those figures. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Aissa Tedei, UN resident representative. Now we'll be taking our final round of questions, and my experts will definitely answer that. But like I said, if you have a question and you are shy to come over, you could just write it on a piece of paper and I'll have it read out. And somebody has done that. And this is a question for Mr. Thomas, and the person says, please ask. Can you expand a little bit on what you said about the CRC's tenure of existence? Because as far as I know, the CRC only has an 18-month-long mandate with possible 6 months extension based on request from the CRC and approval from the President. How do you respond, Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, their mandate is with regard to executing their functions. But the Act states that they would be dissolved. The commission would only be dissolved when the bill introducing the Constitution is considered by the National Assembly. I believe, yes, and maybe you can consult me. I have the CRC in the Act in my car, so I can show you the provisions.
Yes, so can we have Momodu Lamin Sawane?
Thank you very much. And a point of correction is Modula Minsane. My question, I guess, will have to go to CRC because I am aware that the IEC is trying to introduce a new polling system, which is the ballot paper system, or the paper ballot system, I can say. And the CRC has already done their consultation and find out that majority of the people are still in for the marble system. So I want to know what are some of the things that the CRC are doing in order for them to be able